the teaching part of my portfolio career had suddenly become overwhelming. And after I quit everybody, after I spent 6 months not teaching that many students, it became clear that the right number of students for me in a week is not 0, and it was also not 20. And I didn't want to do it the way I had been doing it. I did not want to teach weekly lessons every Tuesday at 4:15, you come over, you give me money, we continue until eternity. That was not what I wanted to do. And that's when I started creating group programs instead and working in a way that suited me so much better. This came from needing to have space for creativity and needing to have space in my life because what I was doing was bringing in sufficient money, but it was not my definition of success because I couldn't breathe.
Hang on a second. Let me check my calendar. Yup. 2022 is here. Congratulations, everybody. We made it to another year. Hey, everybody. This is Chris from HonestyPill.com. You're listening to episode 27 of the Honesty Pill podcast. This season on the show, I'll be talking to people who are breaking the status quo, ditching outdated traditions, and building a better future for themselves and the people they work with. I'll be connecting you with musicians, sound healers, coaches, hip-hop artists, actors, expert oboists, and people who not only inspire and educate every single day, but who are experts at talking about what they do so you can get inspired in your own work. My guest today is the self-proclaimed Unfussy Oboist, Jennet Ingle. I love that title. Can't wait to hear the explanation. Jennet, who in addition to being the principal oboist of the South Bend Symphony Orchestra, is also the creator of tons of online resources for musicians, including her signature group program, the Invincible Oboist, that helps oboists get past the struggle to find ease in their playing. Sounds pretty good. She also created the Reed Club, and that's R-E-E-D, as in oboe reed, that meets every Monday online for social connection and actual making of fantastic oboe reeds, and a group for beginning reed makers called Zero to Reed Maker, which has group classes and elements of accountability. She even has a big announcement about a book that she just wrote and that's coming out soon. Wow, that's a lot of reed talk, and since I am the opposite of an expert on making or playing oboe reeds, let's get right to my conversation with Jennet Ingle. So I am so excited to have you on the show. Jennet, welcome to the Honesty Pill podcast.
I am so thrilled to be on this show, Chris. Thank you.
So can we just jump right in and start with your website's tagline, Jennet Ingle, the Unfussy Oboist. What is the reason you chose that as the first thing people read about you on your website? Is there some sort of oboe player stereotype our listeners should know about?
Have you not heard the oboe player stereotype? I feel like everyone knows that the oboe player is the person who shows up to the gig 45 minutes early with 3 cases worth of reeds, soaks them all up, produces a knife, always has a shelf attached to their music stand, and on the shelf are 16 things that the oboist clearly needs to give a good performance, including like a humidity meter. I think there's a word for that, but I don't know what it is. And a temperature gauge, and like also all of the basic, knife, plaque, the cigarette paper, the stuff and the stuff and the stuff. It's a stereotype fully based in truth. And and also that the oboist is the one who's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's a little chilly. I feel a breeze. We must shut this down. Like, my oboe, it will crack. And first of all, I'm a little fatalistic about the whole, my oboe will crack because it is 63 degrees, not 64 degrees. I cannot get worked up about it. They all crack. I don't want to be that person. I am not naturally that person. I am the person who will show up. Maybe I shouldn't confess this, but I'm the person who will show up 10 minutes before rehearsal with like a sandwich still in my hand and cane in my hair and will sit down and get the job done.
That's awesome. I think that's an awesome life goal for an oboist, but I will tell you that, come on, the fact that your instrument literally will crack if the temperature isn't right and you can't play it, right? I mean, the wood has actually got a hole in it at that point, right? Is that what happens?
Sometimes it's worse than other times, but the oboe is really mechanically finicky. Even leaving aside the cracking issue, the oboe wants to fall apart. It wants to be your enemy. I think I have a hashtag that was circulating for a while. The oboe is not your friend. Because stuff just happens. It's got a million tiny little screws. We are constantly turning and like testing with little feeler gauges, trying to make the thing just stay sealed. I had a student who was in the middle of his seating audition at school and his thumb rest fell off. Just like fell off. Because oboes are terrible like that. And in order to be the unfussy oboist, like, yes, there is a fair amount of preparation that goes into it. At home, I am not unaware of what is going on with my oboe, and I am making the adjustments, and I am like making the reeds, and I am doing the stuff behind the scenes to hopefully set myself up for success once I show up. But I love to just be able to show up and do the job at hand, which is making the music.
I am remembering a gig I did when I was freelancing in Boston at Sanders Theater, and my car had been plowed in, as it happened a lot in Boston, so I just walked. It was across the bridge. And I walked into Sanders Theater, and it was freezing cold. Everybody was huddled into this room. And there's the oboe player sitting down in the green room doing whatever you guys do with your reeds and your knives and things. And I took my trumpet out of the case, put my mouthpiece in, and just immediately started blowing hot air into it as hard as I could to warm it up. And the oboist looked at me and said, "My instrument would shatter into 1,000 pieces if I did what you just did." And I kind of laughed, but then I cried a little because I thought, I'm so sorry that you chose that instrument and it ended up there. Speaking of choosing that instrument, my experience has been most kids in the band gravitate, if they're going to end up in the woodwind part of the room, they gravitate towards the saxophone or the flute. And for one reason or another, some of those kids then get handpicked to play oboe or bassoon. Was that your path? Did you start out as an oboe player, or did you end up there for one reason or another?
I completely agree that that is the path most people take, because the band directors like to sort of get a sense of what's going on first and then sort of hand select the smart kids to the people who are not going to be phased by frustration to deal with the double reed instruments. But no, I started on the oboe. I fell completely in love with it the first time that I heard one and knew what it was. It was in fourth grade. This is a story that you can cut later if you want to, but in fourth grade, when we, were allowed to choose our instruments, I knew I was going to play the flute. I couldn't wait to play the flute. I was so excited to go to school that day and pick the flute. And I got to school, and the 8th grade band had come to play all of their instruments for us so that we could choose. And I heard the oboe, and I thought, oh, well, that's the one. I have to play that one. It was so clear. I couldn't even see it from where I was sitting. I didn't even know what it looked like until I had it in my hands. But it was so obvious instantly that that was the instrument I had to play. And as a side note, I have taught plenty of 8th grade oboists since then. And it doesn't sound good. I don't know what exactly I was reacting to, but it was so clear that was my path.
Maybe what attracted you is it's such a distinct sound. Whether it's good or not, you can tell an oboe from just about every other instrument in the orchestra for sure. You're reminding me of a student I had once who, there's so many oboe stories we could share.
All day long.
Started out as an oboe player, and then she switched to the trumpet. And that summer I was teaching at this camp, I handed out a piece of paper and I just said, "Why did you choose the trumpet? Just write it down. I'm curious." And she wrote the best thing, and I wish I had saved this paper. It said, "Well, I started out on the oboe, but it had so many notes. So I decided to switch to the trumpet because it only has 3. And I thought, oh dear, we are going to have a really hard conversation soon. That's not exactly how it works. But I'm glad that she switched to trumpet because I could help her with that. And I can't help her with the oboe for sure. Did you always know that you wanted to be a musician, or how did you end up doing what you're doing now?
I really just loved the oboe. And I came around to 9th or 10th grade and began to get analytical about what is it that I want to do? What is it that I want to be when I grow up? Because, I was a smart kid and I was good at a lot of things, and there were options. I had options. And I thought about, I really like my math classes. I really like pre-calculus. Do I want to go on in the world in calculus, in math? It's fine. I like the math, but I don't see that as a need. I really liked the German class I was taking. Am I going to go on into German? That didn't feel like a need. But when I thought about the idea that I might move into a life where I wasn't playing the oboe, that just felt unacceptable. So my path into classical music was not through classical music. I don't have some inherent love for classical music over any other form of music. It's just that that's what the oboe gets to do, and so now that's what I do.
That's so interesting, because I feel like so many musicians that I work with fell into it accidentally because it was something that maybe they were naturally good at, or they found their voice. I was a pretty shy kid in junior high, and then the trumpet, it was when I really started to learn how to play, became this great instrument for me to be a different person. And I just sort of kept doing that. And I accidentally went to music school, and then I accidentally got on the audition circuit. There was never a huge, super focused drive in the beginning for me. But it sounds like you've always had that as a goal for you.
It's interesting because I liked the puzzle of the oboe. I liked how do I solve this, whether this in question was this mechanical leak in my instrument, or whether this in question was how can I solve this technical run in the Haydn concerto in C major, so that it sounds even. How can I figure out how to practice this and how to solve it? And then a little bit, actually, I have the same feeling that you just described, where I was a little bit of a different person on the oboe, and still am a little bit. Like, I'm sort of secretly very introverted, but if there's an oboe in my hand or, near me, or if I'm talking about it, I can be fully extroverted, authoritative, powerful in a way that I wasn't otherwise.
This is such an interesting topic, this introvert-extrovert thing. I didn't know there was such a thing as an extroverted introvert until I met my wife, because she is very introverted, but only around people she doesn't know very well. And I would never have pegged you for an introvert. So how did you find your voice as a speaker, as a teacher, as a coach? Was it through music, or was it through necessity? How did you end up being such a confident presence in that space?
I think there was a long time for me there was a long time for me where I was principal oboe in my orchestras, and I was playing the solos, and I could give this big, large interpretation and this large voice as I played solos in the orchestra. And when you're the principal oboe in the orchestra, you get asked to do outreach as well, and you go into the schools, and you speak to the board, and you talk to the donors. And I found at that time that even though I had been very shy, and I still was very shy, and you put me into a room full of people that I don't know, and I would hide in the corner. But if I was holding an oboe, if I had a reason to be there, if I had the authority of my position, it was easy for me to show up in that way. And gradually, I stopped being in my 20s, and I stopped being in my 30s, and I realized that confidence that I had around the oboe, which was a thing that I was good at, was something that could translate much more broadly into me. So it turns out I'm good at lots of things, and I'm good at speaking, and I love doing it.
What makes you more nervous, playing a really hard symphony or standing up for a 5-minute pre-concert lecture?
Neither of those things makes me nervous at all. But I was a little nervous getting on this podcast with you.
So we have all these preconceived notions, right? Well,
right.
That's great that you said that, because for me, the first time I was asked to speak at a Casual Friday concert, which is you walk out with a mic and introduce the concert and yourself, I was freaking out over that. And I prepared more for that than I did for any of the performances I had that month. And I slowly figured out that I also like to get in front of a crowd and talk if there's a context. And I think people think what we do is interesting and want to hear more from us too, which we'll circle back to that later when we talk about the business aspect of what you do. We could talk about your audition journey. That's a big favorite topic of mine, playing with regional orchestras, Chicago Civic, to your current position as principal in South Bend. But and we can talk about that too, but I'd really like to focus on some of these opportunities that you have created outside of the traditional orchestra career, and maybe some of the jobs you've had along the way as you were finding that you could do other things. Like, what were some of your earlier jobs that you held down?
My favorite job that I ever had was working in a gas station.
Okay.
I bet you had in mind some music jobs, but my favorite job that I ever had was working in a gas station after my freshman year of college or so. I didn't have any music festivals to go to. I was living at home. I had to do something. And there was something about that gas station job. It was just sociable enough that I felt like I could do it. So I was behind the counter, ringing people up as they walked up with their mini mart package of Twinkies and beer. And because I had a context, I was the cashier at the gas station. So it didn't feel like I was trying to show up as me, Jennet Ingle, and put anything forward that wasn't authentic. I was just the cashier, so I could have a nice little conversation with people, and that felt like it really broke me open into being able to make small talk and into being able to just have a normal conversation that didn't make me shrink inside my shoes. That was really pleasant. Also, I liked being able to just drink the terrible gas station burned coffee all day long for free. Oh, and there was something about like the cigarette packs. Like they had to be sorted in a certain way and counted in a certain way, and there were like rules, and it felt very much like, it felt almost like reed making does to me now, like very systematized and very satisfying, and there's something about the size of a cigarette pack that like is fun to handle.
You oboe players and your cigarette paper and all your other stuff.
Right?
Listen, I have to just say, I had a job like that too in high school and a little bit into college, working at a deli next to a train station into New York City, and, slinging bagels and newspapers and coffee. And I also really, this is so funny that you just said that, I loved the systematized organization of the cigarettes. And I don't smoke. I don't advocate for cigarettes, but the organization and the point after working there for years, if somebody came in, I can't believe we're talking about cigarettes, Jennet. What happened?
I know
here?
what happened to us. Yeah.
If somebody said, I need a pack of Marlboro Lights, I could reach up and grab it.
No, exactly.
You want
Not even
Pall Mall
looking.
100s? Right over here. Do you want the Doral cigarettes? Bam. I did not have to look up. And I took great pride in that organizational. I think that's kind of a little bit what's great about my brain and what's really wrong with my brain.
But there's something about like that just feeling of effortless confidence and like mastery, even if it's the mastery of like, this is where the Marlboro 100s are. It just feels so good to be good at a thing. I had the same feeling when I worked in a bagel shop also. I would make the bagel sandwiches and I would wrap them up in like the special little deli wrap way. They go in the wax paper and then you fold it on the top and then you fold it over the sides, and people complimented me. They were saying they would say things like, that is the tidiest bagel sandwich I've ever seen, and I would sort of glow inside. And it's such a stupid activity. But in the same way that being the principal oboe in an orchestra is being tremendously good at a very, very specific and very detail-oriented and very constricted thing, right? It's not like I'm going to go out and like ad-lib and scat my solo in Brahms 1. Like there's a real specific, clear thing I'm about to do there. And
I think you should totally try that. Go for it.
Shouldn't I try it? Beep, ba, ba-da.
What's the worst that could happen? By the way, you have a new tagline for your website now. Tidiest bagel sandwich in the tri-state area, right? You could totally, to your point though, there is something also great about doing work that is not creative and that has a very distinct outcome. You make the bagel sandwich in a certain way, you wrap it, you put it in a bag, it costs this much, you sell it, customer is happy. There's no room for error because it's really hard to screw it up.
Yes, because as musicians, we're always trying to get better. That's the whole thing that we're doing. We're striving to get better. And at a certain point, you get up into like the 98th percentile of like good trumpet players. And it's really hard to get from the 98th to the 99th percentile. It's hard to get that much better if you're already like 99% perfect. To get to 99.1 is really a lot of work for a very small extra gain, but you can't ever actually get to perfect. Whereas, like, you can wrap a bagel sandwich perfect. You can grab that packet of Marlboros from exactly the right place without even looking and, like, feel a pride in the perfection that you've just attained.
I know you could talk all day long about playing the oboe, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about taking a specific skill set, like being a reed expert or something, and applying that to something more than just making oboe reeds. So look, for listeners who don't know this, when you play a double reed instrument or like an oboe, you have to make those reeds, like physically make them. You can't even just buy them like a clarinetist would. You guys have to learn the craft of actually knowing not only how to play on that equipment, but how to physically make it. Talk a little bit about that journey and where that started.
It is exactly right that we have to build our instrument every day. And it's taken me a really long time to reframe the magic of that, because the fact is that if I show up for work and the reed du jour doesn't give me the low D attack that I need, I can rebuild it. I can make another one. I can choose another one that I also made. If I don't have quite the sound that I want for this Ravel piece or this Debussy piece, I can make another one and rebuild it. With the ability to rebuild your instrument every day comes the responsibility to rebuild your instrument every day. Actually, I have a vivid memory of being at the Heidelberg Festival, and the guy in the room next to mine, who was a trumpet player, came in after rehearsal and like took out his instrument and started playing long tones. And there I was, like sitting at my desk with cane in my hair and like all these little pieces of damp wood in my hands, with no actual practicing in the imminent future for me, because half of the time is spent in carpentry, which is not anything you tell an oboist when they start.
Okay, exactly. Well, that kind of calls back to what you said earlier about being unfussy or being fussy. Is your instrument has dictated the need for you to get there early and to choose a reed. In fact, it's molded your whole approach to everything, probably, in that I imagine, knowing what I know about you, is you have to really prepare everything well in advance to be successful, because that is how your instrument works, and that's how your mind works, and that's how your responsibility and your feelings of, I will do this and I'll have to show up this way. But that begs another question, which I've been struggling with and working with for the past decade probably, is there comes a point where perfectionism, which we know doesn't exist anyway, but the striving for that and the feeling of wanting to be in control and know the outcomes actually blocks you from a huge world of possibility. And I am starting to slowly embrace more of what is the benefit of unknown? What is the benefit of not being totally in control? And I've found myself in some really interesting situations where things came to me that never would have if I didn't let go. How do you balance that with the way you are because of the life that and the way the oboe has molded you, with the creativity and the things that you want to come up with and make in your world?
I feel like there's the word that came to me as you were speaking was resilient. And the thing that makes me think of is the fact that, can I go on another reed making tangent just for a second here? I always advocate for people. I hear a lot of scarcity mentality in the world of oboists and in the world of their reeds. People say things to me like, oh, I have a good reed, but I'm saving it for the concert, so I'm just playing on these bad reeds just for now because I'm going to save the good reed for the concert. And I even had a long conversation with someone who swore that she kept her good reeds in the freezer to like retain their magical abilities for the next real important performance. And like, I'm absolutely against that philosophy, right? I propose that everyone should play on their good reeds and enjoy the good qualities of those good reeds. The oboe really rewards resilience, because really no matter how much you've prepared and how many reeds are in your case and how great they are, right now, the reed that is on the oboe as you sit in the performance situation is the only one you have. So I very often have conversations with oboists around the scarcity of good reeds, and they tend to try to save their good reeds for the important occasion, and they'll tuck their good reeds back in the case and play on the bad ones. Oh, I'm just playing on this bad reed right now because I have a concert this weekend. And as you can imagine, I'm not a huge fan of that. You gotta play on your good reeds because A, it lets you have the experience of playing beautifully and well and easily, and that is the experience that you want to repeat over and over again. Also, it teaches your colleagues that you are a terrific player who plays on good reeds and does not stress about things. Also, the weather could change tomorrow, or the reed could be another day advanced on its life cycle, and it might not be the same reed tomorrow anyway. So carpe diem, play your good reed, enjoy it. But also, and with equal fervency, I hold the belief that you should play on your bad reeds, because sometimes the reed that is on your oboe right now is the one you have, and you have to make it work. So both things are true. Play on your good reeds, play on your bad reeds, have the resilience, and just be ready for what the oboe, or life, throws at you. And this is how resilience ties back into reed making.
And we'll be right back. I want to give a huge thanks to the sponsor of the Honesty Pill podcast, Yamaha Corporation of America. I've been playing Yamaha equipment for decades in my own practice room, on stage with the Los Angeles Philharmonic, or touring all over the world, and Yamaha has been an absolute game changer. Something I love about Yamaha is the way they pursue excellence in all of their work and at all levels. They are as dedicated to bringing quality work for beginning students as they are for marquee artists. I admire their commitment to continuous improvement and creating a community that includes all of the musicians they serve. Make every note count play Yamaha. Okay, let's get back to the show. This conversation isn't about reed making at all. It's about mindsets and scarcity, and so many musicians, it's funny to see it manifest in the reed choice process, but that we are always in and not to say we are always, we tend to default to being in scarcity mindset because of all the factors that you and I know about and my listeners have heard about forever. Just the predetermined things that we think are true about the work we're doing. I feel strongly about, like you do, that you can align yourself with that scarcity and that's the reality you will create. Or you can align yourself with this reed in my hand is going to be the best thing ever, and I'm going to react and pivot, and we're going to go somewhere. Who knows where we're going to end up? It's the growth mindset. I mean, that's the trick of everything. And I don't know how to teach that, and I don't know how to instill that in my kids, but man, it seems to be the key to being successful, which is a great question. As an orchestral musician with a job, a principal job, how do you define success?
It's funny because in the orchestra, success is defined as much by other people as by yourself, and as much by, is it correct? Is it perfect? Is it environmentally sound, as my teacher would have said? Is it fit in the context of what's going on? Because even as the principal oboe, it's rare that you get to go all, Jennet Ingle on the concert. There's still a box that you are in. Success playing in the orchestra looks like being as right as possible and as in control as possible. But what is success in music is maybe a more interesting question. And I used to assume, like when I came out of school, when I came out of my conservatory, I used to assume that success in music meant that I would get a huge job, the kind of big job that gave me one paycheck that I could rely on forever and ever, and visibility in the field and credibility in the field, and other students would flock to me because I had this big job, and people would listen when I spoke because I had this big job, and that is what success needed to look like. And that is not actually my life. And yet I consider myself such a success in music because I am so creatively fulfilled playing not only in the orchestra, but playing solo recitals when I can arrange them, playing concertos when people ask me, being visible as an oboist. I make plenty of money between the various businesses that I do. All of them feel like creative acts and things that I can pour myself into in ways that feel good to me. I can see my students and my clients progressing and having wins and getting better and better and happier at what they do, which feels like a success. And the things that I felt like I needed that one paycheck job for, the visibility, the credibility, the students, the playing opportunities, I feel so lucky to have discovered that I don't need that one big job for those. I can make those for myself.
I mean, the funny part about that too is if you put a lot of stock into the visibility, credibility piece of being a creative, then you fall into the trap of having a great performance that inspires and uplifts everyone around you, but you miss that one entrance, and that's the only thing you think about on the drive home. I define that as kind of unsuccessful because we haven't found a balance in forgiveness and what creativity really is and what's the point of what we're doing anyway. And I think a lot of musicians fall into that trap of beating themselves up. So what's this idea that you're talking about, the portfolio career? Can you talk a little bit about that as a concept?
Yeah, the idea of a portfolio career is that maybe instead of all of your income coming from one source and all of your external credibility coming from one source and somebody else being your boss effectively, you get to do lots of things, and you get to create your career out of income streams, all of which you have some control over how you start and stop them, when you do them, how you do them. It could be that a career involves a gas station job like the one that I had, if you enjoy it and if it feels fulfilling and if it feels satisfying and if it gives you the kind of money that you want. Mine consists of my orchestra work, freelancing, my reed business, the group programs that I've created for oboists, teaching, and the book that I'm releasing anytime now, real soon now. I do a million different things all the time, all of which are, to one degree or another, in my control. And I have built all of those income streams for myself in a way that feels incredibly satisfying and very secure as well. The scary thing about a one-paycheck job is that things can happen to that one paycheck. Every few years, the orchestras renegotiate their CBAs. Things can happen. Now and then there's a pandemic. Things can happen. It's not that secure. And meanwhile, for me in my life, the money always comes from somewhere. Sometimes it's little, but it always comes from somewhere.
I think it's Tim Ferriss who often talks about in his podcast, if you had a billboard that the world could see, what would you put on it? If there's one thing that I wish, if nobody gets anything out of anything I ever say or any of the guests on this program or anywhere, is that, you are not defined by the instrument in your hands. And I don't want to be gloomy, but like, what if there's another massive shutdown pandemic in 5 years or something? I want to be prepared to continue doing work that not only sustains me financially, but nurtures me creatively in the case of that, for example, or frankly, just have the option to retire or take a year off or take a month off. When was the last time you being a freelance musician in the world, a whole week off from your instrument and didn't touch it? That's important to talk about and to think about if you want to maintain the energy that creativity comes from in the first place.
Yeah, because the downside of such a portfolio career, of course, is that you build and you build and you build and you build, and sometimes the load of things that you have put on you becomes so great that it's a little hard to come out on the other side. I don't mean to sound negative, but that's a specific thing that happened to me. At a certain point, I was teaching, I think, 18 or 20 students in various adjunct college positions and privately at my home and round and about. And of course, I was also giving recitals and playing in 2 different orchestras and running my reed business. And I had this moment of shocking clarity in that I was playing Brahms 1, which is my favorite ever symphony, right? It's not edgy and it's not new, and I love an edgy piece. I love a new piece. I love things that are more experimental than Brahms 1. But Brahms 1, come on, if you're going to write a symphony, you might as well write Brahms 1. And I had just played my favorite part of it in the 4th movement. It was going so well, everything was great, and suddenly this literal voice in my head said in words, "What is even the point?" It felt so shocking to me that was a real turning point. And I found that shortly after that, I graduated many of the students that were in my studio, and I quit 2 or 3 adjunct positions right away, and I fired a bunch of students from my private studio, and I went down from 20 students a week to almost none, because I just had to find some white space. I needed the room. I needed to be able to breathe. And the teaching part of my portfolio career had suddenly become overwhelming. And after I quit everybody, after I spent 6 months not teaching that many students, it became clear that the right number of students for me in a week is not 0, and it was also not 20. And I didn't want to do it the way I had been doing it. I did not want to teach weekly lessons every Tuesday at 4:15, you come over, you give me money, we continue until eternity. That was not what I wanted to do. And that's when I started creating group programs instead and working in a way that suited me so much better. This came from needing to have space for creativity and needing to have space in my life, because what I was doing was bringing in sufficient money, but it was not my definition of success because I couldn't breathe.
There's a reason they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first, and then help others, because you need to take care of yourself if you're going to be any good to anybody else. And that's certainly true in the creative space. Let's talk a little bit about some of those things that you developed outside of being just a performing musician. And listener, of all the things happening in the world on Zoom video, especially since the pandemic, productivity meetings, coachings, kids having online school, cats eating potato chips. I bet you did not know that there is a group of 20 or 30 oboists who meet on Zoom regularly to sit around and work in silence on making oboe reeds together. Jennet, can you tell us a little bit about Reed Club? And by the way, I love this. I have this crazy picture in my head of what this is like, but give us a window into Reed Club and why you created it.
I love Reed Club. I had always wanted to create a group energy around reed making because A, reed making is boring and solitary, and B, people need support around reed making. Like, just because I can make 20 reeds in an hour doesn't mean that everybody can, and most people cannot. It's very common to get to a place where you're like, oh, well, I mean, it sort of plays, but it's not great, and I don't know what to do, and I'm scared to work on it because scarcity. It's the best thing I've made. People need support, and working alone is not fun. So, years and years ago, I tried to create a group reed-making offering. I was calling it Reading Circles, and I tried to have people come to South Bend, my tiny town in Indiana, once a month to make reeds together. And it did not take off. It could not take off because geography is a problem for oboists. There's just not enough of them on the ground, and it's hard to get people to come together in a room, especially if they have to drive 50 miles just to make reeds. None of that felt compelling. So it was a failed offer that when we hit the pandemic and when everyone was locked down and when we all discovered Zoom solved this problem. Geography is no longer a problem. In my Monday night read club, people can be, some people just use it as accountability. They show up to read club because they know that for an hour and a half this week, they are going to work on reads, and maybe that's all they need. Some people show up and say things like, hey, this reed crows like this. Burp, 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 burp. What should I do? Some people show up and say, I don't understand how you do that thing at the corner of your tip, and so I'll bring my camera in and demonstrate it. Or we'll hot seat people's reads. Or we will bring up the Zoom whiteboard and draw reed diagrams and say, okay, this crow sounds like you need to take a little more out of the gutter of the rooftop. Here is the exact region that I'm describing. Or I'll bring in my camera and I'll zoom on a reed and I'll draw with pencil the area that they should work on. There's so many things you can do over Zoom to work on reeds.
Of all the terrible things that happened during the pandemic, and of course, not to downplay any of that tragic loss and all the insanity that goes with it, there are so many silver linings, and I want everybody to just hear this, that there are boundaries and walls that used to exist, and yours is such a great example. No, you're not going to drive 50 miles to make a reed, but if you can just log in, and I love that you mentioned the accountability piece, that I know that other people are struggling with the same challenges I am. Maybe that's just finding time to make this thing that's so critical to me to do my art. Or maybe it's, I have a question about how to scrape this or that. What a great resource that you harnessed. And not everybody saw that possibility, because you basically have 2 points, 2 ways you can go. You can say, well, everything's screwed up, everything's shut down, I'm going to cry myself to sleep, which is totally cool too sometimes. Mm-hmm. Or you can say, what is the opportunity that this failure, this problem, this loss presents? And I don't care if you're talking about auditions or practice room strategies or relationships or teaching or anything, sports. Every failure is an opportunity, and the bigger the fail, the bigger the opportunity if you choose to flip the script on it that way. So I just give you so much appreciation for creating that community, even though it's kind of funny to me to think about, trumpet players lathing mouthpieces in the basement. That would be, I don't think that would work.
No, it's totally ridiculous. But it almost harkens back to old quilting bees or sewing circles, in the olden days when people actually all did live in community, and it was an opportunity for the busy work that has to get done with conversation and with friends and with colleagues around the world with colleagues in your town, I suppose, in those cases, who understand what it is that you're working on and what it is that you're going for. So yes, Read Club has been one of my favorite things to come out of my pandemic, because it's just a group of oboe friends who come together every week and get the job done and laugh and talk and play. I
heart Read Club, I think is what you said earlier. There needs to be you got coffee mugs or anything? We should make that happen.
I should do that. That's so good.
So recently you did an amazing thing, and I want to spend some real time here talking about this. You wrote a book, which is something that to me sounds so scary and so epic. Tell us about your book, The Happiest Musician: How to Thrive in Your Creative Career.
I am so excited for my book to come out, which it will any day now. It is a book encouraging musicians to take agency in their careers in a very much the same way that I have done, to lean into a portfolio career, to look at what is going on in your life right now, what is not working about it, what is your failing reading circle that you're looking at, and how could you get curious about it? How could you transform it into something new? And how can you, instead of just waiting to be chosen and waiting for that audition to finally work out, how could you choose yourself?
You're talking about gatekeepers again here, too.
I'm exactly talking about gatekeepers. The fact that it took me 20 years to realize that the thing I was doing with having a reed business and teaching a bunch of students and doing recitals that for 7 people or for 50 people or for 100 people and playing in 3 different small regional orchestras and freelancing over here, that was actually a life and wasn't actually just me waiting around for my life to start. The fact that it took me 20 years to realize that that could be the point, that I could call it done, that I could call it acceptable and successful, that I have a house that is beautiful and we have 2 cars that are paid for and we have a camper and a child and all these grown-up things that I didn't realize I was allowed to have, that 24-year-old me would have assumed that in order to have those things, a husband, a child, a dog, I needed a job first. And it turns out that I could choose myself and I could make the money happen and I could make the creativity happen and I could keep leaning into the things that I was enjoying and the things that felt good and felt fun to me and have that be my life. Who allows this? And it was shocking to me when I realized that it was just okay for me to have this gloriously happy life that I am in and have that be not the end of it, because I'm always evolving, right? But to not feel like I was a failure because the big audition win hadn't happened, only the little ones.
I love what you're saying so much. Can you talk a little bit about, in terms of feeling like a failure or other people perceiving you as a failure, when you choose to do something alongside of playing the oboe, like create a 6-figure reed-making business? There are people who will judge that, and we may judge that and say, oh, well, I've given up. I've failed at the main thing. That's why I feel compelled to do this. Speak to that a little bit, because I know you and I both know this, but there's a lot of people listening who have ideas who aren't ready to take that leap because they feel like they will have given up on the main thing.
Yeah, because I think we're trained to believe that. I think that's what it is to be a musician coming up through music festivals and coming up through conservatory. The culture of that early training is around, no, it has to be ever more perfect, it has to be ever more like the CD, it has to be ever more magical, and the end goal is this job. And if you don't achieve the job, you're not a success. And if you aren't fully bought into the learning, fully bought into focusing exclusively on your instrument, you're not serious. And there's this, I definitely went through over and over again, visibility drama within myself. For a long time, I was running my reed business and I didn't talk about it. It was just a thing that I had over here, and I let oboists talk to each other about it and send the word of mouth to me without me actually admitting to any of my flute player friends that that was a thing that I was doing, right? It felt terrifying to just admit that I had something else that I was doing. And even a reed business is such a natural fit for an oboist. No one would have thought it shameful that I was making reeds. I was just making a few extra. But for example, I discovered Google Ads and tried to use ads to drive people to my reed business. And that was a big visibility drama for me. The fact that I was going to pay $50 a month to Google to actually say out loud that I had a business, scary, unnecessarily scary. Google ads didn't turn out to be my best friend, but they were fine for me for a long time. There is so much drama within the sort of traditional orchestral world about exactly that, about stepping outside the lines, not being a really serious musician because you are doing something else. I feel like I have 18 stories that are vying for pride of place in my head right now. But one thing that has helped me is, I spend some time on social media and I watch what people are talking about. And I find that when a friend on Facebook who I know to be a quality musician says something about her Beachbody training or says something about the jam that he is making, like no part of me says, that's not a serious musician, right? What I think inside me is, cool, look at these amazing things that my creative friends can do. And surely, if that is the way I feel looking at other people's creative energy and creative success, surely they will think that about you too. And if they don't, they perhaps are not your audience. They perhaps are not the people whose opinion you need to care about. That visibility drama that's still inside me and that like every new step I take feels triggering is a real thing. And also you don't have to pay attention to it.
That's really, really good advice. And it reminds me of that math formula that you take the average salary of the 5 people you spend the most of your time with, and that will be your future salary. Same thing goes with mindset. Spend time with people who are in lack, in scarcity, judgmental, scared, afraid of doing something new, and they will, of course, judge your reed-making business in a completely different way than they would judge you making, homemade jam or whatever, because that's not threatening. Mm-hmm. The craft thing that you're doing for fun is not, if you were going to create a jam company and get a truck and start selling it to Whole Foods and then second mortgage your house for it, then they would think you were crazy. But people do. People do those things. So I think it's really interesting. If something's scary, you're probably heading in the right direction.
Yes, I completely agree with that. And it takes me time to work through my own fear drama around those things. And I do it anyway because it's more interesting. It feels like the joy always comes on the far side of that fear. And I just have to keep pushing through it.
What would be one thing, if you could go back to day one of your business identity, the day you said, wait a minute, I could be doing this on a bigger scale. What's one thing you wish you could tell yourself that you know about now?
I would tell myself that both money and visibility are just stories. And I think I just talked quite a lot about the story of visibility. But I also vividly remember selling my reeds when I was really just starting out for $20, $21, something like that, and debating with myself and struggling within myself for months before raising my prices to $22. And feeling a lot of internal struggle about that, and having to relieve my mind by looking at, remember when catalogs used to come in the mail? I would look at the catalog and go, that's more expensive than the same thing was last year. People expect prices to go up, and it's been 2 years since I raised my prices, so maybe I can go up 50 cents, maybe I can go up $1. The story around money loomed very large in the head of just starting out entrepreneur Jennet Ingle. And what I realize now is that there are a lot of stories around money, right? There's a lot here. But one thing is that positioning is really important. You don't want to price yourself at the bottom of the field to try to bring in the low-hanging fruit. I've seen this with several of my people recently who have started teaching most recently. What should I charge? I know that the person who was before me in the teaching in the school was charging $15 for a half hour or something terrible. I want to be higher than that, but I'm a pretty new teacher. I'm you are so qualified and so experienced and so ready to teach 8th graders the oboe. It's fine. The question is how much value are they going to get from working with you? And the question is, who do you want to be if there are 3 oboe teachers, do you want to be the one that's the cheapest? Do you want to be the one that is sort of at the average of everybody else? Or do you want to be the one that is the most expensive? And maybe a few people don't come to you because you're expensive, but the ones who come to you care. They will put their money down because you are the most expensive, which means you're the best. And this is, I'm being a little bit complicated because it's a complicated story, right? Pricing it's not just obvious, and the answer is not always be the most expensive one around, but also that's just a thing. And I have a story too. I was talking with somebody as I was enrolling for one of my Invincible Oboist programs, and at the time, the price point was $2,000. And I had put it on the sales page so that everyone could see it in advance because I was nervous about the price. And we were on the Zoom call and he asked about the price and hadn't read all the way down, so I had to say it out loud. And so I had some angst about that, and I was like, it's $2,000. And he stopped. He's like, oh. And immediately in my head, I had this big story. I'm like, ugh, it's too expensive. My program has no value. I have no value. He thinks I'm ridiculous. He is scorning me right now. All of this like terribleness is going on in the silence. And then he said, I mean, I have the money. It's just, I'm not used to spending it on myself.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, yeah, because that's me too. And like the very next day I went out and bought myself new bras because A, pandemic weight gain, and B, like, I'm not used to spending money on myself either, but I feel like if I want him to spend $2,000 on me, which he did, I am entitled to new bras.
And, you know, I was talking about bras. Okay, I'll jump in. When you have things in your life, like clothes that fit properly and make you feel good, you operate at a higher plane. You radiate a different frequency. And that doesn't mean you need to frivolously spend money on yourself or on things, but if there's something that is like low vibe, fix it. You know, broken taillight sort of thing. Like, just fix it, because the worry of you getting pulled over all day, every day for weeks until you get around to it is way more expensive than just going and getting the repair job done. Let's do a little money math, because something you said, and we could do a whole separate podcast on pricing, but something you said I think is important. How to know what your own value is. It's really hard. And yes, you don't always want to be the most expensive or the cheapest, but there's some simple things you can do about awareness of what your, like, an hourly rate. For example, correct me if I've got these numbers wrong, but I think you said earlier during our read club discussion that you could make 20 reads in an hour. Was that pretty close? So you're making a read every 3 minutes, okay? You're charging $21, $22 for a read. So that puts your hourly rate at over $400 for an hour, $420. That is a great window into where you might start to price yourself. Like, hey, can you come do a class at my college? What's your rate? I don't know, $125, $150. Well, I mean, right now we know that even just your skills as a maker puts you at $500 an hour. That kind of money math, I think, is important for entrepreneurs to do, whether they're pricing a book for Amazon or an audition course. You know, that book, The Prosperous Coach? Mm-hmm. I have a copy of it right here. I think I paid $50 for the paperback of that book.
Yes.
And and you know why? The author said, I don't want everybody to buy this book. I only want people who are willing to shell out $50 for a paperback book to buy it. So, of course, I had to buy it to see what was in it. And it happens to be a great book. Mm-hmm. But that is a really great example of knowing your value, which is something musicians are terrible at.
Yes, they absolutely are. Like, leaving aside, I feel like my read numbers with precision are vague. I don't know if I have a sentence to like encapsulate as beautifully as you just did what you just said. I just want to agree with you. You're exactly right. And when I set the prices for my programs, I'm not setting a price for, I can teach you how to blow air through the oboe. Like, we have a whole class on air, and I can teach you how to articulate more efficiently on the oboe. Those things are in there, but the magic is that for 3 months, you're in a room with people who are also in a growth mindset around the oboe. We're in a room having conversations about it. There's accountability, there's energy, there's attention to your reads, attention to your playing, attention to the mechanics of playing, there's intensity and intention and attention all for 3 months, and there's a transformation that happens. And the transformation is not worth nothing. The transformation is not an hourly rate. The transformation is the magic. And every time I've run that program, I've raised the prices a little. It's going up to $3,000 for next year. And it's because the transformation is magical that I have seen in people. And it's because I want in the program the people who are willing to pay $3,000 to have an oboe experience for 3 months, to have a transformation. I don't want the people in the program who only want to pay $150 for an oboe transformation.
Totally, 100% agree. You're talking about community, you're talking about accountability, but most importantly, you're talking about the fact that good teaching and good coaching is not about information, it's about transformation.
Yes.
And there is no way to put a price tag on that, but you do show up at the level of the commitment that you make in many ways. I wish I had a copy of your book in my hand so we could dig into it deeper, and I can't wait for it to come out. But maybe you can just tell us one of your favorite things in the book, and who is this book for?
The book is for any musician who is on their way into the industry, or who, having been in the industry, is seeing the limitations of the way we have been taught to think about this, to think about the gatekeepers, to think about what a career in music means and what success in music means. I want it to help people to find their way to clarity and to, I'm putting success in air quotes, faster than I did and more effortlessly than I did. I want it to inspire. I tell a lot of my own story in there, not because I like saying I, but because I think stories are a really valuable way to imagine what might be possible for you. And really, my reason here is that if more creative people and musicians and artists find their way to rise in the world and to thrive in the world and to create success on their own terms, the more people can do that, then the more the next generation sees that happening and the more possibility there is for artists, musicians, creatives, and makers in the world to rise. And that benefits everybody. I want people to bring their magic to the world.
I could not have dreamed for a better response than that. That's a great place to wrap up to. Jennet, thank you so much for spending this time and sharing. I'm so inspired by not only the work that you're doing, the energy that you're creating, but also just you're killing it. You are out there running a successful business outside of your oboe career, which I love so much. It's the banner and beacon of this whole podcast. Where can people find out more about you? Where can they order the book, pre-order it? Give us some links here.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chris. It's been such a dream to talk to you. My website is jennetingle.com, and basically everything in the world links out from there. From there, you can find your way to my YouTube channel where there's 1,000,000,001 reed-making videos. From there, you can find a link to order the book just as soon as it shows up on Amazon, which gotta be within the next month. Gotta be. It's going to be soon. From there, you can find my blog where I write about all of these matters. From there, you can find your way to ordering Reeds Arcane or to talking with me about the Invincible Oboist or about my beginner reed making group, Zero to Reed Maker, or about Reed Club. Everything is findable from my website.
Yeah, and I'm looking at your website. Everybody, it is a deep website. There is so much on here. I'm definitely check out this website. And look, Christmas, holidays are right around the corner. Who doesn't want brand spanking new oboe reeds in their stocking stuffer? Even if you don't play oboes, just order some reeds, get them in there. You never know when you're going to need them. Jennet, thank you for spending some time. Look, when the book is actually released, let me know, and I will send a blast out to my listeners and to my mailing list. And do you have a mailing list people can jump on and book a call with you, that kind of thing?
I sure do. There's a sign-up form at the bottom of most of the pages on my website.
We can put a link in the show notes so people can just click directly through that. I hope you have a great holiday. And are you still working? Are you playing? Or are you guys done for the season?
No, we've got a couple more weeks of stuff, and then we can take a break.
Awesome. Well, take that break, well-deserved, both from this and the business, and look forward to seeing what you accomplish in the new year. And thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much.
See ya. Bye. Big thanks to Jennet Ingle for giving us all the reed knowledge. And you know what? I think she is indeed the most unfussy oboist I know. Be sure to check out jennetingle.com to find her YouTube channel, her blog, and to order her book, which should be coming out soon, maybe even by the time you're hearing this episode. Okay, that's it from me today. This has been the Honesty Pill Podcast, episode 27. You can find out more at honestypill.com. I'm out of here. Thanks for listening. See you next time.